Good morning, fifth grade. We are going to continue on with Chapter 2, Lesson 2 today, which is how did Spanish exploration change the lives of people in the Americas? So we're going to read to find out how those Spanish explorers ended up changing the lives of the people in the Americas, like those Native Americans that were already here. So we're going to start with the Columbian Exchange. When Columbus made contact with the Taino people in 1492, he began what is now called the Columbian Exchange. The term refers to the trading of items, animals, culture, ideas, and more between Europeans and the native peoples of the Americas. The Spanish brought back from the Americas plants, animals, and other products unknown in Europe. These included corn, peanuts, tomatoes, potatoes, pineapples, turkey, tobacco, and most types of beans. Farmers in Europe began to grow some of these plants, which meant that fewer people starved. Also, many of the new foods contained vitamins that made European diets healthier. As a result, the population of Europe grew. So, these items that were in North America were brought back to Spain and other places in Europe and were able to actually help the Europeans with their diet and to survive longer and to feed them so they weren't starving. So that's pretty cool that all started with the plants and animals and native things or things that were native to North and South America. So before we move on, let's go ahead and look at the timeline then for this lesson. We have in 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon claims Florida for Spain. We have in 1515, Spain completes the conquest of what is now Cuba. In 1519, we have Hernan Cortez invades the Aztec Empire. In 1532, we have Francisco Pizarro invades the Inca Empire. In 1540, Francisco Coronado begins to explore the American Southwest. In 1542, we have Juan Cabrillo explores the southern California coast. And then 1565, we have Pedro Alves founds St. Augustine, Florida. If you look at this picture here, you will see the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, among the largest cities of the world in the early 1500s. So you can see all of those almost pyramid-like. These are actually called ziggurats, and they were temples to worship gods and kings. So, all right. Along with items that were from the Americas that went over to Spain. Okay, let's go ahead and read here. We have the Spanish also brought new products to the Americas. These included wheat, oranges, peaches, bananas, cattle, goats, sheep, pigs, and horses. Many of these items changed the way of life for native peoples of the Americas. Horses, for example, changed the way in which Native Americans hunted buffalo on the Great Plains. And we read about that a little bit when we talked about the Native Americans on how the Spanish brought over horses and that helped them with their hunting. Continuing with the Columbian Exchange. So the Columbian Exchange did not involve just Europe and the Americas. It transformed the whole planet. Some of the plants Europeans brought to the Americas originally came from Asia and Africa. Many plants from the Americas traveled around the world as well. Chili peppers, for instance, were brought to Asia by European sailors and became popular ingredients in many Asian dishes. The Spanish introduced sugar to the Americas. Sugarcane, which originated in Southeast Asia, was a precious commodity in Europe because it grows only in warm, rainy climates. Brazil and islands in the Caribbean proved to be ideal for growing the crop. The demand for sugar would make it one of the most valuable crops grown in the Americas. Not all things traded in the Columbian Exchange were useful. The Europeans also brought diseases such as smallpox and measles to the Americas. Because these diseases were new to the natives, they had not developed any resistance to them, so they had no immunity to them. As a result, they died in very large numbers. So this is one of the negative effects that the Europeans had on the Native Americans was they brought over diseases that, again, they had no resistance or no immunity to them, and they got sick really easily and they died from them. The Spanish also forced many natives to work as enslaved persons and even shipped some back to Spain on voyages during which many died. By 1550, few Taino survived. Enslaved Africans were brought to the islands to replace them. This forced relocation of peoples was also part of the Columbian Exchange. So not only was it goods and services that were exchanged, but they also began the slave trade during this time as well. So bringing enslaved Native Americans back to Europe and then bringing Africans back over to the Taino lands where the Spanish conquistadors, the Spanish explorers were actually staying at. So I want you to stop and think about this here. So what positive effects did the Columbian Exchange have on the people native to the Americas? So what were the good things that were brought to the Americas and the good things that came out of the Columbian Exchange? And then I also want you to think about what are the negative effects of the Columbian Exchange. So the positive effects and the negative effects. All right, so continuing with Spanish exploration and conquest in the Americas. By 1515, Spain had spread its control to several islands in the Caribbean Sea. Spain's conquests gave them land to settle and people to enslave, but they did not bring the riches that Spain sought. Sometimes they saw bits of gold in the hands of the island natives. The Spanish wondered, where did this gold come from? So when we talk about conquest, that's pretty much somebody going over and staking their claim in some place. So they just pretty much said, hey, we're taking this land, we're conquering it, and this is now our land. So that's what conquest means. So Juan Ponce de Leon was a Spanish explorer who came to the Americas on Columbus's second voyage. Later, he was governor of the island that would come to be known as Puerto Rico. In 1530, Ponce de Leon landed in what is now the state of Florida. He called the area La Florida, which is Spanish for full of flowers, and claimed it for Spain. He was looking for gold, although legend says that he was also seeking a fountain of youth, which is a place where magical waters could restore one's youth. But Ponce de Leon found no gold in Florida and no fountain of youth either. When he returned there in 1521 to establish a Spanish settlement, he was wounded in fighting with the Calusa people of the area. He traveled to Cuba and died there of his wounds. And this is a picture here of Juan Ponce de Leon, who was among the first Spanish explorers to claim land in what is now the United States. And he, like I said, he claimed Florida for Spain. Hernan Cortez was another Spanish explorer. He was more successful in his search for riches. In fact, he is called a conquistador, which is Spanish for conqueror. Like Ponce de Leon, Cortez was very interested in finding gold. Having heard stories from the native people, he decided there must be a great empire rich in gold to the west of the Caribbean islands. He was right. An empire is a large area in which different groups are controlled by one ruler. Since the 1430s, the Aztec Empire had ruled over several native groups in what is now central Mexico. The Aztecs built a magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan, where more than 300,000 people lived. In 1502, Moctezuma II became the emperor or the ruler of the empire. However, many native peoples under his rule had started to rebel against the Aztecs. We read about him in The People You Should Know. In 1519, Hernan Cortez left Cuba seeking the great riches he had heard about. After landing in what is today the coastal city of Veracruz, Mexico, he and his soldiers moved inland. When he arrived at Tenochtitlan, Montezuma met with him. He offered Cortez gifts of gold and precious jewels. These were not enough for Cortez, however. He took Montezuma prisoner, causing a riot in which the emperor was killed. So this is a statue of an Aztec Eagle Knight warrior found at the main temple in Tenochtitlan. See that picture there. All right. Did you know Tenochtitlan was built on watery, swampy land? The Aztecs developed floating gardens called chinamampas. They stuck rows of thick posts into the swamp. Then they filled spaces between the posts with mud. All right, so after Montezuma was taken prisoner, which caused the riot, and he was killed, the Aztecs then drove Cortez and his troops from the city. They battled on the plains of Autumba, where Cortez and his troops killed the Aztec commander. The Spanish then retreated to a friendlier area. Retreated means they went back to a different area. So an area that was friendlier, there wasn't as many people trying to fight them. A few months later, Cortez returned with a larger force to fight the Aztecs. Along the way, his army was joined by a number of native fighters unhappy with the Aztec ruler. So they got more people to join them that were unhappy with Aztec rule to defeat the Aztecs. This help from native allies was just one reason the Spanish were able to defeat the Aztecs. The Spanish soldiers also had two things that the Aztecs did not. They had fine swords and horses. These gave the Spanish a clear fighting advantage. In fact, even when outnumbered, forces with swords and lances fighting on horseback usually won the day. So they had better weapons, and they had horses because they're horses. Obviously, if you're riding a horse, you're up higher, so you have an advantage for that, and you can move faster to either get to an enemy or get away from an enemy. After 75 days of battle, Cortez and his army destroyed the Aztec capital. On its ruins, meaning on what was ruined and left of the capital, the Spanish built Mexico City. It would be the capital of a colony the Spanish called Nueva España, or New Spain. And this is just a picture painting of the Spanish and Aztec warriors fighting at the Battle of Otumba. You can see the Spanish conquistadors, the Spanish on the horses with spears and better swords. And you see these Native Americans, many are keeled over on the ground here and trying to fight, but looking defeated. In 1531, Francisco Pizarro, another Spanish conquistador, sailed to the west coast of South America with a small army. Like Cortez, he was following rumors he had heard of an empire rich in treasures. From the coast, he traveled with his troop to the mighty Inca Empire, high in the Andes Mountains. The Incas ruled an empire of 12 million people. Because they lived in thick stone cities high in the mountains, they did not fear the Spanish attack. The Spanish, however, had new weapons the Incas had never seen. Gunpowder had come to Europe from China centuries before. The troops Pizarro brought with him were armed with a type of gun called the harquebus. Incan weapons were no match for this. So even though they were high up in the mountains and they had kind of an advantage, the Spanish army had guns, which were no match for, let's say, bows and arrows. So you can see the walls of Machu Picchu show the skill of the Inca builders. And you can see that they had these stone walls that were high up in the mountains. And you can kind of see that in this picture here. Pizarro's army captured Atahualpa, the Inca emperor, and killed 1,500 of his followers. When Atahualpa offered a roomful of gold in return for his freedom, Pizarro agreed. From all over the empire, valuable gold objects poured in. Yet, after the treasure was delivered, Pizarro had Atahualpa killed anyway. In 1533, the Spanish completed their conquest of the Inca Empire by capturing its capital of Cusco. So, again, not a great thing that happened between the Europeans and the natives. Okay, so Atahualpa said, yes, I'll give you what you want. Release me. I'll give you all this gold. And so they did, but then the Europeans, Pizarro, still had him killed anyway. So looking at this map here, you can see those Aztec and the Inca empires. So you can see where the Inca Empire is in South America in the Andes Mountains. So this is where they were. Remember those 12 million in that empire that lived up here in the Andes Mountains. And then you have the Aztec Empire, which is right here in present-day Mexico, in southern Mexico here. All right, let's continue on with New Spain expands. By 1525, the Spanish territory of New Spain included most of present-day Mexico and Central America. Despite its size, Spanish explorers and conquistadors continued looking for rich, new lands for Spain to control. In 1528, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca and Estebanico were exploring the coast along the Gulf of Mexico. They were shipwrecked by a hurricane and landed in what is now Texas. There, the two explorers and their crew lived among Native Americans for 4 years. Eventually, they left on foot. They walked through parts of what are now New Mexico and Arizona to return to Mexico. The crew's experiences made them sympathetic to Native Americans, and De Vaca urged the King of Spain to treat them better. Hunting for riches, Hernando de Soto began an expedition in 1538 through what is now the southeastern United States. De Soto found no riches, but he and his group did become the first Europeans to see the Mississippi River. Then, in 1542, De Soto became ill and died not far from the river. In 1540, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, having heard tales of the 7 cities of gold, went searching to find them. He discovered no such cities. He and his group did, however, become the first Europeans to see the Grand Canyon. They also claimed for Spain large areas of what is now the American Southwest, land that was already inhabited by Native American groups. So we have a primary source here, and this is, in their words, this is Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. At sunset, we came in sight of the lodges and the length of 2 crossbow shots before reaching them met 4 Indians waiting for us, and they received us well. We told them in the language of the Marimames that we had come to see them. They appeared to be pleased with our company and took us to their homes. And this was from the journal of Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo made one of the first Spanish claims on what is now California. He explored the coast around present-day San Diego in 1542. 60 years later, Sebastian Vizcaino sailed up the California coast, giving many places the Spanish names we still use today. Spain also continued to pursue its claims in what is now Florida. After several failed attempts at a settlement there, Pedro Menendez de Alvilas in 1565 built a fort in an area on the east coast that he named St. Augustine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the routes of the Spanish explorers between 1513 and 1603. So let's kind of zoom in here. You can see the lands claimed by Spain in 1513. So that was here. All right. And that was where Columbus landed at here. Then we have lands claimed by Spain in 1536. So that's all in this orange area here. So in parts of Mexico and in southern United States. And then we have lands claimed by Spain in 1575 in red here. And that's parts of South America. And so we call this area here Central America. So it's not North America, it's not South America, it's Central America. So it's parts of North and South America. So when you hear Central America referred to, that's what they're referring to, this area in here, as well as, remember, parts of Florida that were claimed. So you can look at the routes of exploration. We talked about several of these explorers here. So we have Ponce de Leon, and he was in red. Okay, he started in Puerto Rico and went up around Florida. Cabaza de Vaca is in purple here. Okay, we have De Soto in the blue. We have Coronado in green, so you can see where he traveled to. We have Cabrillo in yellow, so he was over here up to the coast of what we know as California today. And then we have Vizcaino in purple, or the light purple, okay? Kind of the same route as Cabrillo took here, a little bit further north into California. All right, so your question now is going to be look at this map key, and you're going to look, I want to know which explorer started his journey in Puerto Rico. So of these explorers, which one started his journey in Puerto Rico? So you got to find Puerto Rico on the map, and then look at the color, and then go over here and find the color on the map. Okay, and then next question, which one went the furthest north? So look at your map key, north, east, southwest. Which explorer went the furthest, the highest up here? Which one of those explorers? Was it the one in red, dark purple, blue, green, yellow, or light purple? So which one of these explorers went the furthest north?